3-minute warning.
That one was also.
Did you do that?
John did.
I saw that and I'm like, all right, who's playing games? City council. We're going to be starting off the study session for the CIP budget. And part of why this is a study session, the council won't be taking any binding action on any of the items. It's just a kind of free-flowing conversation, a little more informal. So if there's any detailed questions, council, that you all may have, please feel free and ask. We have the appropriate staff here. As you may notice, not all of the department heads are here, and so this is more reserved for the department heads that have very large CIP budget requests. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave and Evan to go over the utilities part of the CIP. And in attendance tonight is also a representative with HDR who will be going over and answer any technical questions that you may have.
Okay, yeah, that actually kind of sums up what I was going to do right there. Dave Gwynn, I am the Director of Utilities for the City of Hutch. Evan Patterson is going to drive here in just a minute and go over everything for us, and we have Alex Beck back here with HDR. Agenda for tonight, we're going to go over the background facility assessment status, priority for a CIP summary. Then we'll go over wastewater CIP, water CIP, and then the overall CIP summary. So, turn that over to Evan and let him.
Okay. Evan Patterson, city engineer. HDR has been working to assess our water and wastewater systems. They primarily focused on site investigations of the wastewater plant and of the water treatment plant. and they will be coming back for the wastewater treatment plant to investigate the digesters. And their investigations, coupled with our staff's participation in discussions, allowed us to prioritize the projects that they identified from those site investigations. We have a rating system that we developed, and the projects that are either classified as poor or emergency are the ones that will be proposing to be included in what we call the Year 1 CIP, which is the 2026 budget. We're also taking an opportunity to evaluate the health of our aquifer. We're looking at not just the quantity of water that our aquifer can provide, but also the quality. And fortunately for us, we've had enough rain that we've been able to do some testing of the quality of the aquifer. That's what the photo here shows. It's the MPA testing that will identify whether or not the water in our aquifer is still supplying the quality of water that we anticipate. And this is part of the wellhead protection program that the city started 20-some years ago. So it's in line with those policies. So hopefully we'll have the results from that testing back fairly soon. So working with HDR and our staff, we evaluated the projects considering whether we would rehabilitate or replace parts of the plants. And our keys were, we were looking to maximize the life of the assets in each area, and we considered what was the smartest investment for the city in each case. We developed cost using vendor quotes when they were applicable, and bid tabs when we had that reference information. Now, all the costs in this presentation will be all-in costs. They'll include the engineering, the construction, procurement, and contingency. So this is what we would include to, in some cases with the multi-year projects, not all these costs would be burdened in the first year. We'll get into that with some of the more long lead time equipment.
Evan, if I could chime in real quick.
Sure.
So part of the direction too from staff and ultimately the consultant, especially when looking at the wastewater facility during the budget floor, we saw the condition that it was in. Even with that in mind, the direction was, is there still a way to salvage the facility instead of just the default of we have to build new? And so that was kind of the guiding focus behind this, in the hopes that maybe there can be some innovation there. And so I just wanted to, again, remind the public at large, or whoever may be listening, that the default was, is there a way to salvage what we have, and it wasn't just to build new right away.
Correct. And in all of these cases, what we're evaluating right now, again, is just the ones that were either poor or emergency, primarily focused on health and life safety issues or risks to operation. So these are the immediate fixes that we need to do, minus a few that we've actually started implementing already. We have an area of the plant where the walkways are unsafe. They were identified during the investigation. We've already roped those off, and we're working on getting those repaired right now. So this is two lists of what we're calling the priority projects. We have a handful of other CIP projects that we'll go into detail on this presentation. So these are the ones that we're going to touch on rather quickly because we don't have a ton of time. And there's a list for wastewater and a list for water. We did apply for SRF funding for a number of these, or we pre-applied for SRF funding, and we hope to have an answer on which those projects will qualify for SRF funding midsummer. The date they propose, that they promise, is July 1st. I don't know how to meet it. So we'll first go through the wastewater treatment plant. You all did a tour of the wastewater treatment plant maybe a couple of months ago, so you're relatively familiar with the condition. Some of these photos show some of the other items that HDR identified during their visit. We have concrete that's failing. We have equipment that's at the end of its useful life. We have areas that are not up to code anymore. One of the key areas is the digester complex. This one we're labeling digester complex phase 1 because this is the set of critical items that make this area safe for our workers to operate in it. We have life and health risks right now at the plant, and we feel that it's important to spend this money as soon as next year in order to make this safe for our workers. As I mentioned earlier, HDR is going to be back soon to do an investigation inside of the digester complexes. Inside of the digester complex. The digester complex was identified by Burns and Mack as one of the critical areas, even in their 2018 assessment. That's why we have some money in the, I think, 28 CIP to do work out there. it's probable that HDR will identify some items inside of those as well. But this is the list. This 800K is for the life and health safety issues. One of the other critical items is the influent pump station. This is the heart of the plant. This is where all the liquid feed comes into the plant, and this sends the flows throughout the rest of the plant. This system has slowly been decaying over the years. We had a number of pumps initially, and as those have gone out of operation, we've scavenged them or shut them down. We need to replace the pumps. We need to redo all the piping and valving in the pit. So this project actually has two sets of pumps. The ones critical to the operation are on the south side, and those are the ones that we've identified as doing first. Phase 2 allows us to send flow to the clarifiers on the north side, and that lets us handle a lot of the varying flows that we get from some of our bigger customers that really cause problems with the operation of the plant. That's an important capital expenditure, but it's not as important as the ones on the south side. So while we have the total $7 million in change in the CIP, we understand that within this project itself, the ones on the south side are really critical. So this is Headworks Phase 2. We currently have Headworks Phase 1 under construction out at the wastewater treatment plant right now. That project is getting the grit screen up and running. This project will get the screen and some of the other components, including getting the electrical up to code. So this system isn't operating right now, and every day that it is down, it impairs the operation of the rest of the plant. Rags, other tissues get clogged in the piping and valves in the remainder of the plant and can cause operational issues. So getting this up and running is a key to maintaining operation in the remainder of the plant. The solids building at the other end of the plant is the one that catches all the debris, and it's been ripping it up for several years right now. The centrifuge is one of the main pieces of equipment here, and we've had that refurbished several times, and it's at the point now where HDR believes it can no longer be refurbished and needs to be outright replaced. So that's a huge portion of that $2.4 million is just for the replacement of a single piece of equipment. That it's just every day that the Headworks isn't operating properly, it damages it more. The secondary sludge splitter and pump station is another key process portion. So in this case, we have some pinch valves that control flow between the various parts of the plant, and they're not functioning properly, need to be replaced. And then you can see the concrete is beginning to fail on the slab for this splitter box and needs to be replaced. It's not as expensive, but it's a key part of this overall upgrade. The clarifiers, the primary clarifiers, we initially thought were in pretty good shape until we drained them for HDR's inspection. HDR then found, as you can see, particularly in that bottom photo, you can see where the concrete's starting to spall away, and you can see the rebar exposed there. Basically, all of the innards of the clarifiers need to be replaced. The rakes, the mechanisms, the platforms. The concrete's in okay shape, so that the outside tank is okay, but we need to replace everything inside. This $5.7 million looks like a lot of money. It is a whole lot cheaper than putting in 2 new clarifiers. So we're able to save a lot on reusing the concrete, but the clarifiers themselves are not in good shape. And unfortunately, while it's a big cost, it's also another element critical in the separation between the liquid and solids in the plant.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
What part or how much of the concrete is being reused or being completely rebuilt?
Probably, I would say the bulk of the concrete. What we see right here is really where we're supporting walkways, where it's been supported above the liquid. The concrete for the tank itself, you can get a lot of extra years out of it by using an epoxy liner. So we'll maybe use an epoxy liner in the launders and in the bed itself. Sometimes that's where you get a lot of wear as the solids slide down the bottom of that cone. But epoxy has been used consistently in plants like this to get you another 10 or 15 years fairly easily.
And you would probably remove the design that has a walkway going over it.
That would all have to be replaced, that's correct. Yep, so we would replace it. We were talking earlier, I'm not super fond of fiberglass. I don't like working with fiberglass because it's hard, you can't modify it as much as steel, but fiberglass is a good candidate for things like this because it doesn't erode in the same way as steel does. So that'd be something we could consider. It's also lighter, which means then you're not supporting as much on structure. The administration building, it's at the end of these projects, so you may think it's a low priority, but really it's just here because this is phase one. Again, like a lot of these other ones, we need to get the admin building to a point where it's usable for the occupants. We have issues with the roof, and then there are areas of the building where the workers don't go because of the issues with mold. So we need to address those two things as soon as we can. We talked about getting potable water out to the site, and while that's a priority, we kind of had to step back and rethink how we were going to get it out there, so we'll talk about that at some point. Just not ready to present any plans on it. So we'll have to get by as we can right now. But in order for the workers to actually be able to use the administration building, we need to address these two issues.
The administration building also has the controls in it where it monitors the plant, am I right? Is that still there?
I think that's still all in the lab, and the control room are all in the admin building.
Does that need to be redone or?
I don't know. Is that all fine?
No, I mean, it's something that with the existing plant at this point, you don't need to touch that at this point. If you were to go and make a larger upgrade at the facility, then you'd need to revisit that item.
So the controls will still work the plant when you get it all fixed, right?
With these improvements, yeah, there will be, I mean, there may be some electrical improvements that may be required down the line, but at this point, you would need to enhance that equipment at the admin building.
So employees, do you have enough employees once we fix this thing up? Do you have enough adequate employees to maintain the system?
Yeah, we're fully staffed right now.
And we're working in part with HDR to get some additional training for our staff on preventive maintenance. We're also implementing an asset management system that'll help us maintain some of those systems a little better. So we're trying to do the right things to prevent this from happening again.
Right.
That's our goal.
Yeah, June 18th and 19th, we'll have staff in town to train operators and newer staff that you have out of the plant here later this month.
So on the admin building, why like rehab it versus tear it down and like bring in a modular or something like that?
That's a good question. I don't know, Alex, did you guys consider those options at all?
We did. It was a pretty big ticket item, and on the list of priorities, it just fell a little bit lower, whereas a rehab of 177 compared to millions that could be used elsewhere. Just from a priority standpoint, that's why we went with the rehab option here.
What we need in the other places and how much we do need, if we can rehab what we've got, that's what we're trying to do. And this is significantly less than having to do a completely new building.
And how many staff are housed in the admin building
We have 8 operators, 6 operators,
at a time?
and then we got superintendent, then we got the lab,
Yeah, you got your lab staff too, huh?
and 12 of the day.
And eventually, some of that's going to tie into what Enrico hinted at earlier, which is as HDR works through this phase of their project, we're going to get a better idea of what's the right solution altogether. Do we really want to keep Band-Aiding this particular admin building, or do we buy a couple of years with these fixes and then build a new admin building on the facility somewhere else? We're just not there yet. We're squeezing HDR pretty hard to get this out of them, and they did great, but we need a little more time before we can develop the next level of plan. So that's it for high priority projects at the wastewater treatment plant. The water treatment center is a much newer plant, dates from about the late 2000s, I think 2008, 2009 is when it got up and running. It's in much better condition, in part because it's younger and also because we've worked hard to maintain it. Now, that being said, some of the things that we're going to talk about now are also to avoid ending up in the same situation that we are right now at the wastewater treatment plant. We want to do those investments that help keep the infrastructure in good shape. So in part of that, we have some operational issues with our RO system. We're getting some biofilm development, so we've got a couple of things we want to do to remove the biofilm. We're going to improve the permeate flushing system so that it's easier for the operators to flush the RO membranes. We're going to relocate the dechlorination closer to the RO feed pumps, and then we're going to install some UV reactors to help kill the bio part of the biofilm before it gets into the RO membranes themselves. So that'll hopefully extend the life of our RO membranes and make the plant operate better. This is a fairly high cost, but hopefully has big benefits for us. This one is also fairly expensive. I think all of you, when we did the tour, when we went down into the pump building in the basement, you saw the condition of the pipe down in there. So we have a lot of work to do there, either, surface prepping and recoating existing pipe, or completely replacing some of the stuff that's just corroded too much. Now, one of the important things to note here is that we've replaced the HVAC equipment in the pump building recently to hopefully avoid this kind of corrosion. We're running chilled water coils in there, and we had real issues with humidity control, so the humidity in that building was just insane. We had condensation developing all over the surfaces. Now we have DX units in there to help keep the humidity low, and should, once we've done this resurfacing and replacing the pipe, we shouldn't have this kind of problem again. One of the other issues we have is that right now we have VFDs on all the Northwest well field pumps, and they're all fighting with each other. They're having difficulty finding good operating points because of the way that they tie into the RO plant itself. So we've proposed putting in a head tank at the RO plant that gives them a consistent pressure they're all reporting to, which means the VFDs can then find that right point to run at. This is going to extend the life of the pumps and the VFDs because they're not hunting and bouncing around so much, and give us better operational efficiency. I don't have a picture on this one, I'm sorry, but we've sketched some stuff up. It's just a head tank, like 20 to 30,000 gallons, something like that. Enough to handle the fluctuations in flow as we bounce around between the control points. This is a big ticket item, and we had to think about it quite a bit, but we've had 2 days already this year where we had full power outages at the RO plant and had trouble getting the plant back up online. Right now we have a generator out there that only powers some of the critical systems like the chlorination system. We're proposing to put 2 new generators in, one for each of the electrical feeds, for 100% backup power. This is one of those projects where the equipment has long lead times, so we're stuck with 18-month lead times for the equipment. And it's physically large, so we'd have to figure out where that's at in relation to the plant and the state fair detention basin, so we might have to budge those as a little bit. But this one is one that really lowers the risk of the citizens of Hutchinson being without potable water. We only have about an 8-hour window of water in the towers right now with our current storage volumes and our normal consumption. So this is a big reliability issue. And there are funds out there occasionally available for projects like this. So
8 hours before other measures are taken.
yes, correct. Yep.
This is an electrician's question. Now, why don't we do like wastewater treatment, we'll have 2 different feeds coming in. One feed goes out, we go to the other feed.
We do have 2 feeds. They're both 2,500 kVA, but they both feed different parts of the plant. So we'd have to upsize the feeds coming into 5 kVA, and then we could do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know how far back we're losing power without talking to Evergy about it. I'm not sure if it's something where it's the failure on their end at some common point back.
Gotcha. So it doesn't, your 2 feeds doesn't feed the whole plant? I mean,
No.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. Because I figured it was redundant, but I forget what they feed, but one of them feeds like the RO building, and then the other one I think feeds the pump building, something like that. So, sorry, went on a tangent. Okay, so this one's a little different. The degasification tower is a big clock tower thing out there. It's really tall, and there were some design decisions made with this building that have made it impossible to be able to maintain some of the infrastructure. We have some louvers and some intake screens that have failed because we weren't able to get up there and repair or replace them. So this is a fairly large expenditure, but the idea is that we modify the design so that we're able to maintain those systems from here on out, and include some changes to the buildings themselves, including rerouting some of the exhaust ducts. You remember that one little pony wall where the exhaust ducts were slamming right into it and causing condensation? This includes rerouting that. It also includes a spare blower, because That's one of the critical plants, one of the critical components to the operation of the degasifier tower. So this is basically a on-site spare. So this summary table for wastewater and the summary table for water include in light blue all the projects that I've just gone over, and then the ones underneath that in white are the other projects that are included in the 2026 budget. Some of those, especially on the water side, represent a lot of money. $28 million of water distribution projects. Some of those are ones where the city is extending our water network outside of our existing customers. And we've talked about whether or not that's a responsible use of our money or whether we should reserve that money for our existing customers. Now, we pre-applied for SRF loans for those projects, but just because we pre-applied doesn't mean we're beholden to actually following through on those loan applications. So I think it's worth discussing within yourselves as a city council, where do we think the appropriate use of our funds are? And some of those projects may be meritorious, but it's a lot of money that then wouldn't be able to be used for some of these that HDR and the City of Hutchinson teams have identified jointly are real priorities for our existing infrastructure. And that's it. Questions? I went through a lot really fast.
You guys have some other supporting documents that you at the back there that
Right.
talk through some of this stuff in a little more detail.
Right.
We don't do some of this stuff. Because we know we're kind of busy tonight and we want to get bogged down with everything, but it's in there so that you have that information. If you have any questions for us, please don't hesitate. You want to come back to the plants, take a look at stuff. Alex is always willing to have a conversation, so whatever you guys need. We're more than willing to help.
The only
answer
concern that I have is you plan on putting a full-time electrician, because there's a lot of electrical in this. It's mostly 85% electrical.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Dave and I have talked about that.
Okay. Yeah, because I used to work on all that stuff. I know it's a lot of stuff.
It is a lot. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, mechanicals like to think it's all driven by the process equipment, but the electrical and instrumentation is really what keeps everything moving.
It's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
But yes.
That's not including your wells up there.
Right. Wells, all of the lift stations, all of that infrastructure. Yep.
So I feel like you guys should have started with a statement that says like the water is all good and you can drink it and you can flush your toilet. It's just that we have really old equipment and it's working like double and triple overtime and we have to do all these extra steps. And that's why we are where we are. Because this is all like, if you just hear what you guys just said and that's it, like, that's concerning. But we are not at a point where, like, the water isn't at risk, all of these things. So, you guys had me scared for just a minute, but I know the backstory. I just want that out there for people who are watching or just tuning in, that there is no concern. It's just that we have really old equipment. It's working way too hard. It's not efficient, nor is it within its maintainable life any longer. And that's
And part of this discussion too, I should add for transparency purposes that we would have to adjust our water rates in order to accommodate these projects. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to afford them. We'd bleed out all of our reserves and operating cash. So that is something that we intend to revisit. I don't know the timeline on that with the HDR team, but we are definitely going to have to revisit that.
I think we've advanced it because it's so critical to this discussion. We realized that it needed to be, not only, I think we were originally only going to do like 3 out of the 6 measures.
Yeah, correct. So there's typically 6 measures you do with a rate study, and initially it's scoped to be 3, but we're going to do 6. So it's going to be full-blown rate study, and we're able to move on that this summer, begin working on it this summer, and work with your staff and be able to keep you all informed the whole way.
And is that rate study already within the scope of the work that you guys are
Yes,
doing? Okay.
yes it is.
I noticed on your supporting documents, there's the plant being built in 1958, there was a stretch from 1963 to 1982, there were no improvements done to the facility. And then a stretch from 2002 to 2018 that there were no improvements done to the facility.
That's
So it
probably,
feels like we're playing catch up a little bit.
and that may be major projects.
I'm sure it's major projects.
Yeah.
It's major projects. You're looking at this slide.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. Yeah, we probably are playing catch up a little bit. I mean, those were significant upgrades for the plant, but that's the hard part about it, is there's a bathtub failure curve. And for some of the parts of the plant, we're really well past that design life, and it's,
We're way past that stuff. I mean,
One of the comments made,
you're exactly right, John.
one of the comments was, you know, some of our systems should have been replaced 15 years ago. There's no more useful life left. So whatever the infrastructure maintenance was at the time was inadequate for what probably actually should have happened.
Well, and the interesting thing, looking at this, it's not one piece only. It's as one system is failing or it's on its last leg, it's causing more and more wear and tear on others that are going to
That's
fail prematurely.
Correct.
So one thing, at least, it's a snowball effect on failures. Or
Definitely a cascading effect.
it's a cascading, yes.
And part of the piece there on the employee training and why that's so critical, again, is how to avoid this for future years. And so if we can get everyone up to speed, make that investment in the employees, we're all better off.
And I just want to add, I mean, we've seen a lot of different plants around the region. The staff at both water facility and wastewater treatment plant have done an excellent job of working within what they're working with. You know, with workarounds or with creative solutions for these problems, that's keeping the plant running as best as it can.
Alex, is there anything else that would be good to mention?
No, I think you covered it. Any questions, super questions more so than anything. But don't hesitate if you have a question in the coming days, weeks, whenever it is, reach out and happy to discuss further any detail.
When this situation's done, or this summer is done, or this, what we're doing right now, are we gonna have an idea of all the different subsystems and what the useful life is for each one, and how it'd be nice to see
Yes.
Yes.
Short answer, yes.
holistic design life for the system, not just.
Yes.
Absolutely. And some of the items you see as priority projects, some of them are Band-Aids, because that's just where we're at with the facility age and condition. But a lot of those improvements are full useful life improvements. You make that improvement now, and you're not gonna be digging up and redoing it in 10 years. It's still the useful life of the asset.
okay. Thank you all for your time.
All righty, I'll turn it over to Alec.
Good evening, Alex Stang, Hutchinson Airport Director. So I'm gonna breeze through these slides a little bit just for the sake of time. I did give you guys a handout that kind of elaborates on some of the stuff I'm gonna cover in here. The best way to kind of approach my CIP request is kind of look at it over the next 5 years, because it makes sense in a 5-year project. There's a big appetite here to modernize and push economic development at the airport. And so we've kind of put together a ambitious project that incorporates about 4 main key items over the next 5 years to achieve modernization and further economic development at the airport. The first being a runway 1331 full concrete reconstruction. So this is our main runway. It's 7,000 foot long, which is a good length. However, our subbase is rated weak, and our surface is flexible because it's asphalt. And so we have a relatively low index for weight bearing on that surface. So that means we're currently turning away aircraft because of their weight, not because of their ability to land at the airport because of length. This would help address that situation. It'd replace that weak degrading subbase. boost that pavement index. And the idea would be to have this completed before the 2029 USGA Senior Open. Along with this, we're looking at a modern jet center / hangar. So the infrastructure out at the airport is considerably aged. The terminal building itself is around 70 years old. It's got great charm. It's dated. So this would serve as a modern FBO. It would have an executive lounge, ideally, pilot lounge, office spaces, and conference room. Looking to serve our corporate traffic a little bit better. Kind of sets the foundation for a regional leading operation at the FBO. Next part of this is FBO operations and exercising the city's proprietary exclusive right as the sponsor of the airport. So this right here would be effectively the airport administration taking over the fueling operations. At the conclusion of the Wells Aircraft Services lease at the end of 2027, we would have to beef up our staffing model. And this is an estimate of what that would look like. 4 operations technicians, an op manager, admin assistant, and airport director. And this is the closest labor cost I could get at this time, as well as the ground service equipment layout. And in your guys' packets, it kind of breaks down all those numbers for you. This scenario, we would be looking at basically, this transition enables Wells Aircraft to remain at the airport if they so choose to, and continue to provide their Cirrus Service Center services.
Question here.
Yeah.
If they choose not to stay, if Wells Aircraft chooses not to stay, would that go out for RFP or
Yeah.
just out for rent?
Yeah, so we have 2 choices when that lease expires, or prior to that lease expiring. We can either renegotiate a lease with them, or we can do an RFP and send it out. There's a lot of interest for commercial hangar space right now, And then lastly, the decommissioning of runway 422. So this runway has lost its FAA sponsorship, so it no longer receives federal grants for upkeep. I did ask engineering this past year to give me a cost estimate of what we need to do for a mill and overlay currently on it, and that was roughly about $750,000, which would be footed by the city. So in the interest of trying to minimize our expenses in maintenance, and the fact that this runway, it's relatively little use, we kind of looked at it as an opportunity to turn this about approximately 270 acres into economic development land. And this piece of land that we're looking at here wouldn't necessarily need to be aeronautical in nature, so we could open it up to commercial and industrial or logistical use. It's not confined as a aeronautical use. So 2026 CIP, looking here, originally I had airport signage replacement at $25,000. We might push that off to a later date. on the Airport North maintenance shed. This is to bring electrical power to a shed that was built prior to me joining the city. The shed is already set up. It's already got electrical doors. It's already got lighting. It just doesn't have power to it. And if we give power to that, we could actually satisfy one of the requirements for getting a dedicated plow truck grant. Next up, I got the rehab for 1331, the reconstruction. So we would be looking at the planning and engineering analysis next year. That totals at $160,000. We would utilize BIL, and then our local match would be only $8,000.
Alec, what's the grant on this, on the Airport North utilities? You said this would make us eligible for a grant.
Yeah, so that would be for a dedicated plow truck.
Well, what's the amount
Snow
of the grant?
removal. I'm not there yet, to be
Oh, okay.
honest. Yeah. So we have to get power to the building first. They require us to house that, that piece of equipment. So, and then on this, lastly, for 2026, planning and engineering for the hangar slash jet center, gauging about 60,000 for that. 2027, we would go into the engineering of the reconstruction of 1331, looking about 300,000 total for that, with a local match of 15,000. And then again, planning and engineering for the hangar jet center. 2028, we would break ground on reconstruction of 1331. So that's when we'd be looking at about $10 million of investment at the airport, with a local match about 488,000. Yeah, 488,000, and then start building actually, I'm sorry, 2027 we should be completing the jet center. So that's an error in my slide. I don't believe it's an error in the budget though. 2029. Again, the reconstruction would be two parts, split over 2 years, and a large portion of that, the majority of that, 95% of that, would be FAA funds. And then estimating 300,000 for decommissioning 422. So next up, I got our municipal equipment. So right now, about 70% of my equipment out at the airport is past its useful life. So we've got quite a bit of equipment that we need to start turning over. In some of this equipment, we've evaluated and decided not to actually replace. So that kind of informs our municipal equipment request. And in 2026, we're looking at replacing a tractor and a mower deck at the moment. But 2027 is a big jump because we're going to have to purchase those items for the FBO and fuel operations. So overall, over the next 5 years, looking at about 23 million investment out at the airport, 19 million of that being federal, with local being 4.3 million. Any questions at the moment?
You had that entire jet center as a public-private partnership. You had that entire dollar amount listed in there as part of the CIP.
Yeah.
Because it's unknown whether that's gonna be 50/50 or 70.
Yeah, I have it at, so with the engineering, 60,000.
Right.
So I have a request of about 2,120,000 for that. And again, we want to seek out a public-private partnership with that.
So that should go down quite a bit as far as public.
And the $19 million of federal grant funding, that's all kind of piecemeal on different projects along the way.
So that big chunk of that is for the runway
runway.
reconstruction, yeah. So that's anywhere between a $20 to $25 million project. We'll know more next year after the study. And of course, we'll update these numbers going forward. But it is a big project, but it's mostly funded by the FAA. And right now, our conversations with the FAA, they're receptive of it. They see that the runway has kind of aged out, especially with that weak set base.
All right, next up is Cecil.
Okay. No, I'm staying. He's gonna drive? Yes, I'm just here.
So Evan gets to pull a little double duty tonight because he helps Dave and I with a lot. So I'm going to kind of go through this, but if we have some questions, Evan, by all means, jump in.
Yes, sir.
So it's kind of broken up. My packet's broken up a little bit, a couple multiple different budget sources. So the engineering and CIP has got some stormwater and as well as just our normal engineering projects. We have our residential chip seal overlay areas, our arterial and residential overlays. That's the mill and patch actual. And then our crack sealing, which kind of falls into, some of that is done through the chip seal area from contractors and the in-house stuff done by street staff for the 2 and 5 year overlays. Bridge maintenance reserve, we had that in there. I believe that's one we're talking about removing this year, but it was in the packet already. That goes into a fund to build up for future projects. Along with the Brick Street Reserve, that is a fund that goes in for, we're building it up until we can have enough money to do a good sized project. Or as we come across bigger projects that need not quite enough to have its own full-time CIP.
Why would you remove those two to put them into the?
The only one we actually removed right now is for this year is the bridge maintenance. We do have reserve money in there, but we're just removing this year's payments. Yeah.
And part of that too was to help hit the theoretical number we needed to. And in the event that if something were catastrophic with a bridge, we would just bond it. But we do have money is in there already, so we're not hurting by removing it.
Sorry, my question is, where are you putting that 150K? Anywhere else? Or is it just-
It was taken
it's
out.
just taken out.
There,
Okay.
over the course of really all the CIP proposed projects, millions of dollars had to have been cut.
Right, I mean, we're well beyond making
Yeah.
it for 150, so.
Yeah. Along with that, the arterial number, the 3.4 million for the arterial and residential, that was the original number we were coming to ask for. We're going to be trimming that down into Angela hasn't given me the exact number yet, but when she lets me know what it is, that's what we'll have to work with to get our plans for what streets will get done. The downtown maintenance and reserve, that's also another one of the ones, I believe that was, Evan, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the one that we were doing actually some other funding. We don't need to do that to meet any requirement.
That's right. So we're gonna, so Well, no, we do need that, so we have our TA grant for downtown, and we have to match 100 and some K of that. So I think we're gonna use the downtown maintenance and improvement reserve to match our portion of the TA grant, if I remember correctly.
There were some portions of that and the ADA curbing ramping as well.
Yeah, we're gonna steal from, I think, maybe both of those to go to that.
Yep.
Because the total TA grant is like, the total project is like 1.1 change, and we have to chip in 20%, so we're gonna cover our portion out of that.
Moving on with the curb and gutter drainage improvements, that goes along with a lot of the areas where we're doing the chip seal and residential, to work into that, and stormwater reserve for study, design, and construction. We're also going to be doing a reconstruct on Halsted, proposed for from 4th Street to Mine Road. That section's been in disrepair for quite some time. The following year after that would be the next section of that, going from Mine Road on out to G. And then our Safe Streets for All. That one is, right now, we're in study of what streets we're going to be doing that with.
Yeah, and that one, we pay 20K, and I think the state matches 180K for 200,000 that we can spend on studies for streets or intersections, anything safety related that we're curious about, whether it's pedestrian, bicycle, rail. And we're still kind of scoping what we're going to do for that, for this. I think we can apply this fall for that one.
And then the Sand Hill Diversion Box Rehab, that has been, we've gone through, and it's gone from a replacement to now repair.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is, JO actually came up with the idea. They're just going to give us a set of specific fixes for types of problems, a couple of sheets worth. We're going to get a contractor on the board, and they're going to go through and identify spots to repair. This is like 1.5 miles long, so it's an enormous box that stretches from north of 30th down to Rice Park. And we're going to budget 500K, and we're going to work through it, starting at the north end, tackling whatever repairs we can, and see how far we can get with the budget. Because it's not a complex structural design, it's just areas where the concrete's thin or needs patch or is cracked. So we thought that was a really great idea, and ultimately, whatever budget we set for that, that dictates how far we can repair in the box. It's going to identify how many years it takes.
So that's kind of the overline of these, and then we have some slides in here that kind of go over each of those. So our residential chip seal areas, obviously that's planned to help keep the streets drivable. Chip seal is a very good product for just kind of keeping the streets up to date, but eventually more work has to be done. So we have an 8-year cycle right now where we touch every residential street in the city once every 8 years. Along with that 8-year cycle, we're also going to be implementing in 26 a third of each of those areas will get a mill and overlay. So the idea is you can only chip seal so many times before you end up, your streets get too thick. You have to do something different. So we'll do a mill and overlay on a third of those 8 sections of town. So once every 24 years, every residential street in town will have a mill and overlay, which is roughly the expected lifespan of asphalt roads. We're doing chip seal as a site maintenance. Crack sealing is just an ongoing process to keep the roads up to date. It just expands the life of those roads by keeping moisture out of the areas. Our bridge maintenance, we talked about, like I said, we're pulling some money out of that this year, but we do have a reserve set back. And that identifies places like some of these in the slides, it's stuff that's been worked on this last year. Places that were replaced, we had a pipe that the inside was starting to cave in. We replaced that. I think we went back with that one with full actual boxes, correct?
I think so,
Yeah. So,
I have a question on the crack seal and then a question on the sand hills box. So, stupid question about the sand hills box. When they fix the concrete, are they just doing it from the inside?
Depends on where the failures are. I think the failures are largely on the inside from the last, we had a report done about 10 years ago, and I think the failures were all on the inside, but I'd have to go back and look.
Okay. And then on the crack seal, so once they crack seal, we're not going behind them and like repainting center stripes and sidelines and stuff like that.
Not in every location. What we're trying to do with some of our newer stuff now is, we're trying to work with, when we have a new street put in, we're trying to have that center line offset slightly. So when you're putting your thermal lines down, they don't necessarily line up directly on it. It's gonna be our goal. Because you do, when you crack seal that seam, you end up covering that up. Fortunately, right now, if you crack seal over it, there's really no good product to go back over that. Paint won't stick to the tar. You can't use thermo on it. So we're looking at some options of offsetting our markings slightly off to the side of that center seam to help eliminate a lot of that.
So the roads that look like that, there's no fix for those until they're milled and overlaid.
Pretty much. We can paint them, but the paint will not last very long on the places that already has cracked tar on it. So that's one of the things we've been instructing the crews. That center seam, that was something that just throughout the years of training, we have found that we need to actually leave that one alone if we want to have the yellow lines stay bright.
A lot of the roads with crack seal don't have striping, like the residential roads.
Yeah, residential will not.
Yeah.
The residential roads, every time they're crack sealed, that's actually done by the contractor that's also the one doing the chip seal. The in-house personnel doing stuff is what we call a 2 and 5 year. So when a street gets overlaid, at 2 years it gets crack sealed, and at 5 years it gets crack sealed, and then kind of continue that pattern on until it gets another overlay. We talked about brick streets earlier. The brick street maintenance, we are building a fund up, so when we start finding some of these areas like that where we can come in, and a few options we're looking into is stained concrete, where we can put it in and it looks like brick street to still have that appeal of the brick street, but it's a lot more durable surface. Or asphalting the roads completely and taking the brick street away for a better drivable surface, something that's more maintainable. The downtown improvements, we've had a lot of the downtown ADA ramps and others that through some, I don't know if you want to touch on that or not, but some of the designs that were done, some of the brick inlays and stuff, it's not a good fit for our particular climate. They work great in California where you don't have freeze fall cycles, but the brick inlays in our area, you get moisture under that, they start popping. So a lot of the downtown area is going to get those fixes, bring those sidewalks and stuff back up to where they need to be.
That's what'll be good to go through when we select the designer for the downtown TA grant, is consider which of those areas where we have those dissimilar materials, and some of that really just bad alignment of the bricks or of the edges. How far does that $1 million go? And what area are we covering with it? So we've talked, Dave Sotelo is about coordinating some of that with the downtown groups. Sorry, Dave.
And then with the ADA, it follows the same principle. So with the ADA stuff, we'll be looking at intersections that at one point ADA called out for having some of those brick inlays and stuff to be a detection. We're moving to some better design patterns now, stuff that can be, and it stays in place a lot better for protecting. Our curb and gutter program, same, we're following through with the 8-year cycle on our residentials. When we find locations that we're having drainage issues or curb and area damage, we're kind of go through there and fix those as well. And it just ties in with that 8-year cycle. So we may not hit everything in an area that year, but we try to get the worst of the worst, especially in the areas that are drainage issues. And then with our stormwater maintenance, we're moving towards doing a lot of our projects in-house. So the street department will be out cleaning ditches, getting that stuff up to where it needs to be. Then there's the 4th and Halsted area. as you can see in some of these pictures, just a few, that area is just a very aged location, along with a lot of high truck traffic, along with railroad tracks where you get the bounce. It tears up the area pretty quickly. I'm going to let Evan talk about the safe streets because he knows way more about it than I do.
Sure. Again, this one is just, it's a program that lets us spend somebody else's money evaluating some of the areas in town that we want to determine if they're appropriate to investigate further. So, as Cecil mentioned earlier during your session, I think, we've been evaluating some of the signals in town for whether or not they warrant still having signals, but we could also look at whether or not we're having lots of crashes at any particular intersection. Hopefully we'll have some data to come out of that.
This slide kind of touches on the Sand Hill diversion box rehab. So that's the entrance. If you, if anybody ever wants to, we'll be happy to get some people to walk through it with you.
In the bottom right, how some of the rebars just starting to pop through, whether it was too close to the concrete to begin with, or whether it's just falled off over time. Not sure, but that photo dates from 2015. It's probably not any better now.
If you do go through it, you have to sign a liability waiver.
And go ahead and make an appointment for your chiropractor after, because it's a lot of leaning over. So. And then we're gonna jump in, I guess stop there for a second, see if you have any questions on that portion before I jump into the traffic lights.
On the 2026 proposed budget, $100,000 for curb and gutter drainage, but yet the available cash balance is negative 29,000. So are we just paying that back of the 100K first?
Some of that is going back into the reserve, I believe, yes. Well, I'll jump into traffic lights. Like we've talked many times, and I believe Steve can definitely help me back on this, our traffic lights they're aging. We have some systems out there that, there's some stuff out there that poles and stuff are 50 years old. Yeah. The average lifespan expectancy of a controller is about 10 years. I mean, it's just a computer out in the weather. We have some controllers that are pushing 30 years. So it's just definitely a very aging structures that need to be brought up to date. Along with that, wiring itself, just out in the elements, the wiring starts to get old, cracked, brittle. And when that happens, it allows water to get in, and that's when, every time it rains like it has the last couple of days, our traffic techs are very busy and either putting lights on recall or going out and checking to see why they're kicking themselves into flash. So we're trying to have a fairly aggressive approach. In years past, we hadn't been able to spend as much money on traffic lights as what really needs to happen. So the big share of what we're looking at for this is, there's some of the wiring, and you can see the environments are not perfect, so all of the manhole covers, they're not exactly waterproof. Moisture gets up into those manhole covers where the wiring sets. And as that wiring gets older and occasionally rodents and other stuff gets in there and chews on it, or even the connections themselves just tend to get loose over years. So moisture gets in there and that's what needs to be fixed.
Is that your work, Steve?
No, that's just a real fast comment. When those things, those manholes get full of water, and they do in this persists, they'll get full to the top. You can take the manhole cover up, and the water is boiling. That's electricity.
Oh my gosh!
It's boiling. I have an apprentice, taking an apprentice, and I opened that up and says, "Give me that wire down there." And he looked at me, "You got to be crazy!" Well, yeah, the wire is boiling in there.
Oh my gosh!
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of voltage all day long. So we're really taking an approach to how we can try to improve these systems that are aging. And then, so there's some more of the cabinets. And for nobody who's ever had to be inside of one of these systems, my hat is truly off to Steve and people he's trained, our traffic techs we have now, because if you just open that up and not know what you're looking for, it really is a mess. And it's designed that way. It's not a...
What'd you say?
That's your one.
So,
How many that's DP 2000. How many do you have of them left?
more than we should. I'd have to look for around 15 or 20, I believe. So, and then we still have some of the M10s out.
10s, huh?
So, I mean, very old systems that should be replaced. Just kind of a brief overlook of some of the ideas we had going in. These were some of the numbers we were looking at. Just stuff we're gonna try to get replaced, you know. So we were looking at, and this was done in like a 6-year idea. We've kind of redone some of those numbers. These are some numbers that we had gotten from information JEO had gave us on what we need to bring this up to date. And they had figured we had $10 million worth of needs just to bring the system up to date. So in order to try to do that in a 6-year period, it was asking for obviously way more than we'd be able to get. $1.5 million a year, many years, it just wasn't working. So this was just something that JEO gave us. I put it in, or had the staff put it in for me just so we would be able to show you everything that's kind of out there. That's the gist of the initial, we're asking for the upgrades and maintenance. We also had another CIP separate that we were asking for because traffic poles, like we talked about, are expensive. This is a traffic pole that sits at 4th and Adams. I don't know if you can see it real clearly in that picture, but the side of the pole has been hit numerous times by semis turning too sharp. The pole needs to be replaced, and with that, we've already got, we had to go purchase some easement from the gentleman there, and that pole will actually get moved farther back to be safer. But that one pole alone is $100,000 to replace the pole. So we put it as a separate, and that's probably the way we're going to do it in the future is we'll have these poles in these areas like this as a separate, so you can really see what that one cost is. And that's pretty much the traffic in a nutshell, so any questions?
Pulls $100,000.
Yeah. And usually a 6-month wait.
I see an economic opportunity in the city of Hutchinson for some business to start a manufacturing.
There's only like 3 places in the country making poles.
That's correct.
And what do we have to, the new foundations have to be
20 feet deep, yes.
20 feet and 3-foot diameter.
Yeah, so it's
To
a
meet the new KDOT standards.
gigantic foundation.
23 feet deep.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a whole cage structure that you put in there.
It used to be 10 foot deep.
And that's for standard. If it's something out, typically like a multiple lane out on K61, it may be more than that.
Added problem on those traffic poles is on the risk management side, all these people that keep hitting them, their insurance coverage is not even close to the cost. So they might have 25,000 on property coverage, and we end up having to turn it to our own carrier to try and get most of the cost recovered for the city. So if you do away with some of those signals on the intersections, good, because just to put up a stop sign costs next to nothing.
You don't have to put the stop sign 23 feet deep?
No.
Fine, put the traffic one together.
Yes.
All right, Justin. This one?
Maybe at midnight or something.
That's the right one?
All right. Yeah, so my projects, CIP projects for 2026. First one is at the animal shelter. I know we talked about this at our budget tour. Also want to point out that the funding source for this would be one of the trust funds. So the animal shelter has a couple different trust funds. So this would not be a tax dollar project, but because of the size of it, really does need to live in the CIP. But we would look to use trust funds, so funds that were left to to the animal shelter for improvements. But as we talked about several weeks ago, this would be building some sort of cat room, communal cat room, or free-range real-life room. Currently, all of our cats live in individual cages, so they're just, rows of cages, and that's really not great for the cats. It's very stressful for them, and it doesn't kind of promote kind of natural behavior of cats. So by building these real-life rooms, we would improve the welfare of the cat, so it would reduce the stress of the cat. It would enhance adoption rates. To put that in perspective, last year we had just under 1,500 cats that came through the animal shelter. And so by having the cat act in more natural behavior, adoption rates will increase. We'll also maximize space and make some efficiencies for staff as opposed to cleaning a whole bunch of individual cages. Now we just have a couple larger rooms that we can clean. So it definitely creates some efficiencies for staff as well. The other idea we have is maybe down the road we could turn one of these into a cat cafe, which is literally what it sounds like. So it's where you sit and order a cup of coffee and hang out with a bunch of cats, and maybe could run that by volunteers. But so as we build this, we'll at least provide the infrastructure for that. So really popular in urban areas, but I could see that being popular here. So. Second project is woody seat lighting and landscaping. So this was to add pathway lights along all the sidewalks, and then irrigation and landscaping along the entire routes. So lots of trees along the way, fine turf grass. So we'd probably do, we'd sod the whole thing, irrigation. So it'd look really nice when we were done, and then pathway lights. I think we don't have the final design done yet, but we're 25 to 30 individual pathway lights. And those lights are very specific to the walkway, so we're not going to have a lot of light pollution over into people's yards or anything like that. And this also would include the welcome sign or some sort of welcome sign in the center roundabout as well. So.
What would be is that like on the sloped part of the bridge and all of that, or is that just? So
that's everything. It's on the slope parts of the bridge, and then from the roundabout as you're looking at it. So below the roundabout to the right and left, so where the on and off ramps used to be, as well as where the big loop is. So that's that entire area.
Is that part really pretty nice. Flat? Or
yeah.
Is that part okay?
Yep. So it's fairly steep. The slopes are from C to B. At B, I think the bridge deck's 6-ish feet, and then it goes down obviously to nothing as it gets to the roundabout. So, but that includes those slopes. We would irrigate and have those looking really sharp.
So you're going to irrigate that and then mow it every week.
Yep. I mean, we mow it now, not every week. It will be easier to mow at this point because we're not dealing with as much slopes. Because right now we mow a lot of it with the remote mower, which isn't ideal for a time stamp. So the big one, Memorial Hall renovations. $5 million. So that is what was in the master plan. And this is based on the feedback we got from the community at the open house we held a few months ago. This also is assuming STAR bonds. So the project is eligible for approximately $4 million worth of STAR bonds. And you can see I have the price breakdown there. It's nothing new. Hopefully everybody has seen that price breakdown. So the large projects are obviously heating and cooling, so $1 million or 1.2 million just for new building systems, and then interior finishes and upgrades is the other big one. It's a little over $1 million. This also does assume that top balcony, so the third level or the second balcony, the very top level, gets converted into some sort of multi-purpose rooms, some sort of flexible space. If we don't do that, if we keep it as is, there's actually a little bit of cost savings So that's what the number down below is, the 4.7, is if we don't, if we don't enclose those top rooms, that top balcony. So here are the floor plans. On the left is the first floor. So upgrades in restrooms, upgrading in the ramps will be converted from ramps to stairs. We'll update the concession stands, new floor, and new flooring on the stage as well. Also, the boiler room, so the room that's on the far right, it's kind of in red, and we'll no longer need that room for a boiler room because we won't need to have boiler heat. So in the plan, it called for a commercial kitchen, but that could obviously change. It could become something else. So that would be all on the first floor. The second floor, we have a new concession stand. So the second floor is what's on the middle diagram there. So the box in red would be a second floor concession stand. And you can see where those ramps are being converted to stairs. And we add restrooms in corners. There's currently no restrooms on the second floor. And then on the far right is the third floor. All those yellow boxes then would be those multi-purpose spaces. And then the red box is a concession stand. So essentially we're stacking concession stands. And then you can see again the ramps are being converted to stairs. And then in the blue in the corners are restrooms, because there's currently not restrooms on the third floor. So again, stacking those restrooms on the first, second, and third floor. So.
How are we ADA compliant when we do away with the ramps or wheelchairs?
So the ramps are not ADA compliant as
I know, but
so
you
we
put
have
steps in there.
the elevator.
Elevator?
Put in the 90s, early 2000s, I think. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there. Any more questions on this project before we move on?
I had, Steve, to speak to maybe part of your question, I had emailed the fire marshal and chief and about that, about the elevator and everything. They said that the elevator is in good working order, and that in the case of a fire or an emergency, that becomes the rescue point. So everything about the elevator is on the up and up. It's really the ramps that are the concern.
There's no way to make those ramps ADA compliant. You need so much linear foot to make that work. It just doesn't work. So
If I remember right, those elevators do have emergency stuff in them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and we also have areas of rescue in those old offices, and they're all marked and unlocked. So if somebody's not able to get to the elevator, they can get to one of those areas of rescue, and there's an intercom system in there as well. Okay. Any more questions before we move on? The next project is at Shattuck Park to update the HVAC in the main gym. There's a picture on the far right, a unit that's hanging inside the roof there, or just below the roof. That unit is about 25 years old. The technology that they use for this unit is really outdated. There's some parts we can't get. The unit functions now, but if it has something that has a failure, there's a chance we won't be able to replace those parts. So this would be replacing that with just a standard rooftop unit, like we see on most of our other large facilities. Jim Martinez Trail improvements. So this was a phased project, and I just have the first phase in here. The first phase is really just design of converting the entire trail from asphalt to concrete. A lot of the issues we have now is because it's 4 inches or probably 3 inches of asphalt on bare dirt. So they just scrape the dirt and roll, took a street roller or something, and then put the asphalt down on top. So there's not much we can do to save and salvage the asphalt. So the idea is to convert to concrete, which is a better surface. It also allows us in-house to make repairs to it down the road if we need to. But also this design would also look for opportunities to get the trail out of the levee system. We hear a lot of complaints about people that use the trail that they feel unsafe when they're inside the levee system because you can't see very far either way. You have the waterway on one side and you have the levee on the other side. And so we'd look for those opportunities to bring it outside of the the system. Whether or not that's doable, we're not sure, because that is a Corps engineer's levy, so we have to be careful when we start messing with that. Also in this design process, we look for opportunities to put additional amenities. You know, it could be a small shelter, it could be a bike feature, it could be whatever, just to create more of a linear park feel as opposed to just a straight trail. I do have in my CIP then the following years a phased approach to improve the trail as we go. Total investment over about, I think it's 4 years, right now is looking at about $2 million. But the bulk of that is just converting from asphalt to concrete. Fairgrounds Park, playground replacement. So this is one of our playgrounds that really needs some updating. So you can see some of the pictures there, just at the overall condition of the playground. This one gets a ton of use because of the splash pad. So this would be completely replacing the equipment there.
What would the cost be on this to do poured in place?
Essentially double. So we're getting quotes right now to replace what's there, and we're in the $125 to $140 or $150,000. And to do pour in place, you essentially double it.
So I know that the playground and the splash pad have some separation, grass and the path, right? But the mulch in the playground never causes an issue at the splash pad, does it?
No, we don't get a ton of it because of the separation. I mean, I'm sure there's been some kids that have intentionally dumped it in there, but it's not like foot traffic's always bringing it in, so.
And the fence around the splash pad, does the fence separate the two also, or does it just go on the other sides?
I think it separates them too, but haven't paid that much attention to
On
it.
3 sides, I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
This would be one, if we do want to really start looking at poured in place, this would be one of my top candidates for our new playground. But again, that essentially doubles the price of it. Grace Harbor Park Development, we did trim this up a little bit from our original ask. So this is the park kind of behind Wendy's in front of Salvation Army, and we're getting really close to having a lease agreement. The main components of this is a gathering space or open air shelter, a couple different pieces of playground equipment, so some for 2 to 5 year olds, and then another piece for 5 to 12-year-olds, and then a walking trail. The other thing that was really important in this neighborhood was having some events and festivals, so they wanted a lot of the space just to feel open, so there's kind of that grand lawn concept in the center. This design was really driven by the neighborhood, so we've been working with the Grace Harbor neighborhood for a couple of years now to come up with this design, something they've seen multiple times and had input throughout the entire process.
Would this be leased or purchased from the Salvation Army?
It'd be a long-term lease.
So we would have complete control as far as development, insurance, maintenance, all of that, and the Salvation Army would...
Really, they would have very little rights to it. I think we give them, if they want to do an event there, we'd allow them to kind of have first priority to reserve the space. And then if we ever get rid of it or ever don't want to use it as a park anymore, I think we'd go back to them. So, but, Paul, do you remember, is that a 75-year? I don't remember what the terms on that. It was a long term.
We'll all be dead by then.
Is it 25 initially?
25 with a 50 extension or something.
So what would be sorry, I really love this park and I would love for it to be successful. It feels like it's duplicating Avenue A with the band shell. And they're not that far apart from each other.
This wouldn't be near as big a band shell, and this one would serve more on an everyday basis, just as a picnic shelter. So there would be tables and chairs underneath, but then if we wanted to host an event, if the neighborhood wanted to, they could move the tables.
Sure.
And the other thing is, Grace Arbor, or that neighborhood is difficult if you live in that neighborhood to get to a park without crossing major streets. So to get from this neighborhood to Avenue A, you're not going to walk there. or if you are, you've got to cross multiple major arterial streets, whereas this will be, right in their neighborhood. Parking lot maintenance, so this is two projects in one. The bulk of this is to replace the parking lot in front of the parks facility, maintenance facility there in Cary Park. That's also doubles as the bike park parking lot. That's actually not even a real parking lot. It's asphalt millings that over time have just been compacted. So this would be to convert it to a true asphalt or concrete parking lot. And then the second piece, so the middle picture is the parking lot for the zoo. So it'd be to just resurface that and restripe it. The goal mainly is the restriping because it's really tough to get in and out of there. It's not great for drop-offs for camps and those sorts of things. When we have busloads of kids in the spring, it's really kind of a pain. So we reorganize the parking lot to make it a little bit more convenient. And then the last project is the Zoo Master Plan Phase 1. So the graphic that's up there shows the areas for all the phases down the road. So the yellow or the gold, whatever color that is Phase 1. So it's kind of got two different pieces to it. So the first phase, or first part of Phase 1, I guess, is the train loop itself. So we've identified that we want to keep the train loop where it is, that it's not worth completely rebuilding and moving, but we do need to do a lot of really heavy maintenance, and essentially we do need to rebuild it. So right now the railroad ties are just sit in the dirt, and then there's track on top of that. Well, those railroad ties have rot. A lot of them are getting rotten and soft and start to shift, and then we have derailment on the train. So this would be elevating the railroad like you'd see on a normal railroad track with 18 inches or something of crushed stone, so those railroad ties will last longer. But the loop itself would stay the same. We also move where you get onto the train, so you can see there kind of just behind or below where it says rehab. We have a new train station. So just kind of a pergola type feel, maybe with stalls like you'd see in an old time train station where you'd get into the train. We also in the center in the loop, you see where it says tortoise and kangaroos. So we'd add some sort of interactive exhibit there that could possibly be a revenue driver with feeding of kangaroos and feeding of sulcata tortoises, which is a species we already have. So they're over on the other side of the zoo right now. So, did I miss anything on that piece, Nicole?
The barn for both of those actually attaches to the existing train barn, and we would be able to put plexiglass windows in there, so even when the animals are inside, you would be able to see them, either walking up to it to be able to see them, or as you ride through on the train, like even during nights before Christmas, something like that, you would be able to see them. So we're really trying to make sure that animals are always visible, even if they're inside.
Yeah, so this says AC right here is animal care, so this would be a new building, essentially a new addition to the existing train barn, and that's what she was talking about, where we could have some plexiglass panels, so as you came through the barn, you'd still be able to see the kangaroos and tortoises. So this is the other end of the loop then now. So again, the train loop is in essentially the same location that it is now. In this phase, or this piece would add Mexican wolves here, and then javelinas or peccaries. I always know them as javelinas, but that's this. And then there'd be a third yard up here, which would be a mixed species. Right now it's called out as pronghorn and deer. Nicole has a great idea for bighorn sheep, which would be really cool. But so this one maybe is a little undefined at this point, but some sort of mixed species in this area here. And then you're seeing some additional phases. So I know we've talked about the lodging piece, so that's what you're seeing up here. and a few other things. So none of that would be part of this phase. It would just be the Mexican wolves, the javelinas, and this mixed species yard up here. Anything else there, Nicole?
I would just like to say that when we are picking animals for our collection, we're picking animals that we can have really great welfare for, that can be outside as much as absolutely possible, which also means that we have less infrastructure. So the peccaries would have to have a barn that has some heat in it because they are more of a southern species, but Mexican wolves don't have to have any heating or air conditioning for the barn. They are also critically endangered in a U.S. Fish and Wildlife U.S. Fish and Wildlife project, which means we have minimal interaction with them. So from a keeper standpoint, they would get fed most of the time once a day, but they also then get carcass feedings, and you wouldn't feed them again for 2 or 3 days after that. So we really tried to be fiscally responsible with our enclosures and also in our species so that we can provide good welfare for them.
Compared to what a lot of other zoos are doing, $925,000 is a huge ask. It's more investment than we've put in the zoo in probably 15 years. A lot of zoos are spending way more than that on single exhibits. So this plan, we're improving the train and introducing potentially 3 or maybe even 4 new species to our zoo.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Go on.
so that's what I was going to add. Is these exhibits are for 3 exhibits. That's really cheap. I mean, a lot of these zoos are building $5 million exhibits for 1 species. So, and it will extend stay times for customers. So they're not only going over to bison, but they're on the other side of the zoo as well. So you can keep people there longer and open opportunities for revenue. So
We've talked a lot about the cost of the zoo and fees, potential entry fees, which I know is not very popular. And so by this route here, keeping the no entry fee, but then trying to increase ridership along the train as a potential revenue driver as well. So it's kind of the strategy with this, because we want to be sensitive to that. We like the fact that we're a free zoo. We think that brings a ton of value to our community.
And with this, I would say, Scott can speak to this too, but from a Friends of the Zoo perspective, we would make sure that the train is running all the time. Obviously, the train is in good shape itself. When we have had failure, it's been the track. So that's where that investment comes in. But Friends of the Zoo owns the train. They provide the insurance and have provided volunteers, and so that staffing would come from them to keep that going. And we can, with our weather, we can and do try to keep it open as much as possible. So we're even running it in October and November, and then obviously in December, the weather allows too. So it's an add-on opportunity to the experience, but it is something that we feel confident that we can provide that experience consistently.
And Friends of the Zoo you're all in on this plan? And
yeah, I sat through, what was that, 6 months? Was it planning?
It was a lot.
Yeah. We presented to the board, and we got approval from the board on it as well. And so, yeah, we're all in on it. So
it's a great group of people. Thanks for your work.
The mayor asked where the grizzly bears are going to go, so I'm going to back just a little bit. So grizzly bears, let me get my bearings, are here in this green. So kind of where the mini farm is now.
So to give you perspective, bears sooner than the mini farm or farm needs to move out. So that bottom purple corner on the bottom right down there is the new ag space, which Scott has done some pre-work in our community and feels good that that could be really well supported. And then once they're out of the way, Grizzlies, so.
It's a little bit of a domino effect.
I mean, we could put them together, but only once.
Get rid of them, you probably could get the bear first.
And the last thing is just, or anything else on the zoo before I get into reserves? So every year, I ask for reserve funds. This is primarily just for unexpected failures, for breakdowns, for project overages, those sorts of things. So you can see how I break it out there. I will point out, I know we've talked about ADA sidewalks. This fund, so there's multiple reserves for ADA sidewalks. This one is primarily for public-owned buildings, so if we have a sidewalk issue in front of this building, we've got some money set aside to replace that, or an ADA ramp in front of a public facility. So. And there's an error there. I did not ask for 50,000 for the aquatics improvement. I think that should be 25. So, but the other ones.
Was
10, okay. Any other questions? I'm not sure who's next. Maybe I was last.
No, for the Chiefs, Chief Burley, really the only thing that they had was rehabbing a part of the, actually Burley, could you talk about the only piece you had?
Yeah, it's just it's a rebuild of the generator for the court that controls the entire courthouse and law enforcement center. It's necessary, so if we have a power outage, we can still maintain communications and keep emergency services up. It was actually set to be, needed to be rebuilt in 2018 because it's met its end of life, but due to budgetary constraints at that time, it was pushed down the road. It's at that stress point now to where that rebuild needs to occur in 2026. The total project cost is $200,000. Our share of that is 68%, which is $136,000 for that. That will be at the top end of the bill. If we're still working with the county on if we should supply that full cost of, or if it should be better divided amongst all the residents inside the courthouse and law enforcement center. But that's the only thing that we have.
I thought that was a county generator.
We're in a county building.
I see.
We just have $75,000 in there for maintaining 7 buildings. HVAC, roof fleet, all that type of stuff that gets supplied to maintain everything. That's an annual cost that we've had in there every single year. And we have $50,000 in there for concrete work. And that's all we have in the CIP.
We transition to Dave, Matt, and then Angela.
Yeah, so I only have a $50,000 request there for wayfinding and van refinement. It's a priority for council and staff and certainly Rico, improving our wayfinding and our signage, banners, just improving that as we prepared for some of those big tournaments in the next few years. So just a $50,000 request for next year.
And I will say one of the things with the wayfinding that we want to take a critical look at, like where the optimal places for wayfinding signs are. Because I think one of the struggles that I have just with myself is if, say, wayfinding signs didn't exist already, would someone go out of their way to invent them to solve a problem? I'm not really sure. But they do help with navigational tools, and so we're going to try to look at where is the best place for wayfinding signs, period. Because they're kind of scattered throughout the city, so is there a way to hone in to where they work a little more effectively, maybe leverage our Placer AI data, where are people coming into town, maybe just place them there instead. So I think we're going to try to put some metrics to where these signs should be, but a lot of people do find value.
Yeah, I think the way we're thinking about it is more as a marketing tool than actually wayfinding. I mean, most of us are using our GPS to get us from point A to point B. So likely when someone's coming to our community, we put a lot of placer data together that analyzes which streets folks are taking, where they come visit the Cosmosphere or Prairie Dunes or the salt mines. We can see which streets they use the most, and so then we can base strategically, as Enrico said, where wayfinding might make sense. Because as you know, when you're in another community, if you go for the Cosmosphere, you might not think about the salt mine, seeing some advertisement or communication of that might be helpful. So we'll have less wayfinding signs and just more worried about welcoming signage to the community. Cecil's team at some point this year will start working on taking down some of those old, outdated, crusty wayfinding sign that's standing.
Manhattans are cool.
Okay, noted.
What about the signage in Cary Park, like for, it's kind of for both of you, like, over there has the old river, City of Hutch logo on it, a bunch of signage has that.
So because we don't want to just, there's a ton of signage in all the parks, and Justin will know more of cost, but what we didn't want to do is just put a cost of changing all of the signage to all the parks and just face it out as we upgrade some new signs. I think we just got done upgrading most of them. As we start upgrading again, we'll include the new look, but we don't want to just incur a huge expense on upgrading for the sake of a new logo.
Okay, thank you.
Now, wayfinding is the signs that have all the, like where the salt mine is.
Yeah. Just points you in the right direction of where to go.
Matt Williams, Director of Community Development. So we've got 3 different things on the CIP. Number 1 is $150,000 for the commercial facade improvement program that we talked about earlier this year. We've already gotten some really good interest in that from different business owners. We have $300,000 again for downtown master plan projects. And our big one is $1.2 million for demo reserves. 200,000 being for residential demos and $1 million being for commercial demos. I know we've got, the 10 buildings next council meeting that we're looking at, so we expect some of those money to go towards projects like that.
And part of beefing that up is to not get deterred from, well, it wasn't in the budget. So that way, at least the idea of we're gonna condemn your building and flatten it can be taken more seriously if we have money in the budget. So that way we have the information needed to carry out the task. And then Angela.
All right, so I don't know if everyone grabbed one of these packets on their way back from break. I put to, does anyone need one? I'll pass those around. The first page I have here is just a 5-year recap of what we've transferred from the general fund for MRF. So you'll see last year we transferred $3.2 million, but actually that's not correct because Todd gave some money back from his IT MRF. So I think it was $300,000. I just thought of that. And then below that is the CIP. So we transferred $3.1 million. $1.4 million of that being in sales tax that we collected that's dedicated towards that. Then there's an ordinance saying we're going to transfer $350,000 from general fund called growth, and then street transfers $200,000, and then so other projects, including some road projects, for $1.18 million. So that kind of gives you some historical background and probably where we should try to aim to be this year. And then the last line is what we have budgeted to bond the last 5 years. And normally we target to bond around $6.5 million because that's about what we're paying off in bonding. So we just kind of have this revolving cycle so that we know we can afford the bonding that we're going to do.
in the future. So to get there, we have some possible cuts. So I should have numbered these pages. I apologize. But on the back of the physical page, I have some proposed cuts that'll help us get there. And at the top of that page, you'll see the first column is 2.6 million. We probably need that to be closer to 1.75 million. That's the cash the general fund is going to transfer. And then the second column says 10 million. That's the amount we have budgeted to bond. And so we need to look at that number again. But then below that are some of the adjustments that we're proposing to do. Fund the facade program over 3 years. The Jim Martinez Trail will be funded by reserves. The downtown plan, we're going to reduce that by $150,000. The Green Park, defer a year. Airport signage, Alex said we'll probably defer that a year. The downtown maintenance reduction, possibly reducing that $100,000. Traffic lights, reducing that $100,000. The RPZ, reducing that $75,000. And then, I mean, we told you we can never fund the streets to what we should be, so we'd have to reduce that 1.85 million. So until we can get another dedicated funding source for our streets, we're gonna have to do that every year. We're not gonna be able to fund what we should be funding those for.
And it should be noted too that even going through the exercise of making further adjustments to hit that theoretical dollar limit, we had to make several other $1 million cuts to get to that. And so at some point you reach the point of diminishing returns where I understand the popular approach of rev neutral or mill levy flat, but we're really running into what else do you cut? And so if we know, and I feel bad looking at Cecil when I was telling him, hey, I'm gonna have to cut your street maintenance budget. Ideally, in most other communities, to make the street maintenance budget tamper-proof, they do have a dedicated sales tax that exclusively funds the streets, whereas here it's Stratica or Cosmosphere and whatnot. So then we get our portion, but we're always going to hit this hill of what do you do? And so I know that at least in Kansas, if you exceed the revenue neutral and keep the mill levy flat, it looks like you increase your taxes when we didn't. I really think as part of this, we need to consider how we want to approach this year's budget, because Angela and I still have to look at operations, and I'm a little worried on that side.
So the total funding source is at 10.01 million. And then the proposed adjustments of 2.55. That gets us down to about 8.5 to bond.
No, those numbers above are with these adjustments.
That's with
The
these
packet you got before had these in it. We took these out to get to these numbers. So
That-
we still need to go back and make more cuts to get to where we need to be.
Yeah.
But we just, this is a start. And so now, I mean, you know, we hear what the council wants to prioritize, and then we take another try.
Do the thing we do every year.
Our joint meeting with the county, we left it really open-ended with the tax, sales tax discussion. Where, have they moved forward with any other conversations?
So Randy had approached me recently, and he was going to be working with WSU on doing a community-wide or a county-wide survey on what the county would like to see in a sales tax. And since that could possibly be a joint venture with the city, he had asked, I think the number was $26,000 if the city could contribute to helping pay for that survey. This was a very recent discussion. I just said, let me run it by everyone to see how that goes. But I mean, we certainly should probably entertain any and all means to get more revenue.
So the survey would identify what we'd want to fund with that. It wouldn't identify the likelihood of passing.
Correct. Yeah. So it's in terms of priorities, you know, infrastructure, housing, economic development were generally the ones that, at least within the visioning task force and the things that we talked about in that joint session. So,
And because it would be coming as a county sales tax vote, we would be able to hold a special election any day of the year, give or take the certain restrictions.
I would have to double check, I don't want to steer you
We
wrong.
wouldn't be tied to November primary ballot.
I think the county, they have different restrictions. I believe they would have to take it to the state first. And then after going to the state to get their approval, then they have the green light to move. And that was advantageous for the city because we don't have to do that. So I don't know.
You're right.
I'm just trying to think through how it works for them. And I know that they have the state issue that we don't, because they're more of a creature of the state.
And the county's already maxed out.
Correct.
So for this budget, that's a moot point because there's absolutely no way that we're gonna know anything more about a potential sales tax vote before we are required to vote on this budget.
When will we have some estimates on where our property tax revenues will be based on the current bill budget?
The county doesn't have to get those to us until June 15th. They usually do around June 10th, but.
Well, didn't we at one time, because I've been here a long time, didn't we used to have a sales tax for streets only? We used to break, didn't we have that one?
I mean, we have the quarter-cent and part of it goes to streets,
Okay.
but it's just not enough anymore.
Well, we might have to take that quarter and take it up. We already have it, right? But it's a quarter, right? So I might have to take that up to.
You'd have to get voted on.
Well, and the idea too of having it be dedicated exclusively from sales tax, one, it eliminates the tamper-proof concept, but also that then frees up the general fund, because the street is almost at least 50% or so paid for out of the general fund as well. And so then you can use those other monies towards other needed projects, and so that it's a win-win for everyone.
What I like about a sales tax is that it takes the usage of the streets, of the facilities and whatnot, and it lessens the burden on just our taxpayers, and it puts some of it onto our visitors, on our tourists, et cetera. Because as they come into town and they buy anything, and drive on our streets and whatever, like, it just kind of lessens it a little bit for us, diversifies our portfolio essentially, which I was looking at adding one as well.
Couldn't agree more. It spreads it out and not just property owners.
It's a very equitable approach to revenue generation.
And it's voted on by the people, so.
And then finally, so as part of the matrix here and the math that we need to perform, there are also kind of a series of council projects that just as they have come up, I try to take note of any comments and stuff that are made. So we do try to make an effort as staff to hit these things. So just kind of consider those. We don't need to hash anything out here, but just in the back of your mind, where kind of priorities lie. So what would move, either get cut entirely or move a year or two to get these other projects off the ground. So obviously we're going to have more budget sessions.
Angela, do you need advice from us on whether or not we're remaining neutral tonight, or is that for another hearing?
No, I would imagine like mid-June, we would start talking about general fund operating budget. I would think we would discuss it more then unless Enrico has different guidance.
Yeah, we're good. I'm
So
good.
June 15th, or June 17th meeting, you'll declare, or?
That would be more on the operating on our operating budget.
Okay.
That's gonna be,
So you guys will know more from operations and from the sales tax, or from the county tax information on the 15th, give or take.
Yeah, we'll know more information. We don't have to declare, I think, until July 15th or July 20th.
We ever not made the declaration, even if we intend to stay revenue neutral?
They've changed some things about that. They used to recommend, yes, do it, just in case the valuation changes. They're saying you don't have to anymore because now the county clerk has the authority, if your valuation changes, to hold you to the revenue neutral rate. So you don't have to worry about the valuation changing and
Changed for
throwing
last
you
year,
over.
didn't we? We did that last year, didn't we?
Yeah, so we don't have to, if your intent is truly to remain revenue neutral, you don't have to go through with it. And that'll become an issue more in the, like, next year when the state's not gonna pay for those notices to go out anymore.
Well, we just put a toll booth in and everybody pay a toll to use our streets.
Right outside your house?
Yeah.
It'd be very popular.
This is the only part I don't like being a city, this part right here in the budget, I don't like it, but,
Well, on the,
This is the only part?
yeah.
well, I will say though that, you know, the budget document, the final produced budget document, it's usually referred to as the most important policy document that a city puts together. Because that's all of your ambitions, priorities, community ideals baked into one document. So this is the most important policy document that we do put together.
Yeah, but us city council members, we don't get paid for that.
Put it in the budget, Steve, see how that goes.
Got to raise the mill levy for that one.
Okay.
All right, well, any other fleeting thoughts or opinions from council? Going once? All right, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.